your reaction to the report?
Well, obviously I'm quite disappointed that the Minister hasn't felt able to keep his promise and take this report to an independent hearing where evidence could be heard from both sides. What he's done is abandoned the investigation, say he's not going to have a hearing, and published one side of the evidence. And the great pity is that people are only getting to see one side of the evidence. And of course we had a very full and comprehensive defence case which we were hoping to put to an independent hearing, and I'm sure we felt would be successful. So we don't, myself and my supporters don't accept what is being called the findings of the Wiltshire report. There aren't any findings, there are just allegations. They're allegations that have now been dropped, and I'm in a sense pleased to be cleared of any misconduct, but at the same time disappointed that we didn't get the hearing that we were promised we were going to get.
Do you feel the report's unfair?
I think it is a fair reflection of what we'll call the prosecution case. People have been paid over £1 million to put together a case criticising the inquiry. Well, if you gave me £1 million to criticise somebody else's work, I'd probably do a job. Think actually I'd do a better job than Wiltshire have managed. But they've been given £1 million to come up with criticism. They've come up with criticism. We were promised that this criticism would go to a fair and independent hearing where we could put our case. That promise has been broken, and that is really a breach of a promise that was made to me, to the public, to the states and to the Royal Court, and it's a pity that that promise hasn't been kept.
Thank you. Question number 2 is, do you accept that you failed to keep Lenny Harper under control?
Lenny Harper's a very senior officer, and he was an experienced detective and I wasn't. And so what I did was bring in experts from the UK to sit and guide Lenny and to give me some advice on how I ought to be handling that relationship. But of course most of my time was taken up in looking after the force, and Lenny, a very senior person, was looking after the investigation himself. Lenny was appointed by ministers. He held office in his own right. The minister was his disciplinary authority, not me, and I think it isn't the relationship that you'd expect between a boss and a subordinate. It was a partnership. And I think I've answered fully the allegations that were made about that. They're all set out in my statement that I made to Wiltshire. The Minister has abandoned any disciplinary proceedings in relation to that, so I think that issue's closed.
What do you think now to have been alleged to have run up big and unnecessary bills then?
Well, I think we need to know a little bit more about that. If Lenny was entertaining or looking after senior people from other jurisdictions, and we did get an enormous amount of help, people sometimes gave up their own time to come to Jersey and help with special expertise and to provide advice and contributions, and he might have provided hospitality. What we do know, for example, by way of comparison, from figures released in June, that the Minister himself has spent £51,760 on meals and hospitality for the people from Wiltshire who've been helping him put his case together. Now, Lenny Harper could have bought a lot of meals in a lot of restaurants for £51,760. So I don't see the auditors crawling over the minister's bills for £51,760, but I see them nitpicking over restaurant bills that Lenny Harper run up for a couple of £100. And I think this is typical of the imbalance that we're finding in this case, where one side of the argument is being put, but the other side of the argument has been ignored.
Do you feel it wasn't unnecessary expenditure that he did there?
Well, I think you need to know more about it, but he's a grown-up person, and all of his expenditure was signed off by the finance officers who were appointed by ministers to look after police expenditure. They always made it very clear that I wasn't a qualified finance person, so I shouldn't be signing off the accounts, I shouldn't be overseeing police finance. The accounting officer was for a person from the Home Affairs Department who signed off all this expenditure. And really, I shouldn't be trespassing on his patch by talking about the expenditure, because it's really his job, and I'm sure he can explain himself.
Thank you. It says here, how can you say that on the 20th of May the news that the find wasn't a skull came as a bolt from the blue, when Lenny Harper had already had a letter from the lab telling him that on the 17th of May?
Right, I said it because it's true. It came as a bolt from the blue. I was out of the island, I was on business in another place, and that's the first I had heard of it. And I've explained it fully in my statement of 62,000 words, which I gave to the Wiltshire inquiry. I'm told that the Minister has published his side of a story and has not published my statement of 62,000 words, which answers most of the allegations that he's raised. I don't know why he's done that, but I think the way to deal with this now is for the Minister to be honest, to be direct, to publish my statement redacted as necessary so states members and the public and the media can see both sides of the story. I want to see people to see both sides of a story. I wanted it to go to a proper hearing that would hear both sides of a story. We've in effect been cheated out of that proper hearing by the Minister dropping the case. I'd now like the Minister to publish my statement in its entirety if possible so people can judge for themselves. That's what I want, both sides of a case heard. People can judge, and I'll accept any fair and independent verdict. What I won't accept is a verdict based on just one side of the case.
And there's another question about the expenditure again. It says, was it really necessary to put forensic teams up in a 4-star hotel so far away from the crime scene?
As Chief Officer of the Force, I don't sign off people's hotel bills, but I know that hotel bookings were made on some preferential rates through the Finance Department and the Home Affairs Department. Suitably qualified accountants signed the whole thing off. You know, if that's what it's about, has the Minister really spent over £1 million in a year and a half nitpicking over people's hotel bills? Is that why I've been suspended a year and a half? Is that why we've had all this upheaval for a year and a half and over £1 million of money spent on an investigation that hasn't produced a single disciplinary charge? If it's about nitpicking over hotel bills, is that what we spent £1 million for? You could have bought a hotel for the money that's been spent investigating these hotel bills.
It says here, why did you spend time compiling secret files on politicians?
We didn't spend time compiling secret files on politicians. What we did was make sure that any paperwork that crossed my desk that related to a politician was safely filed in a secure place where it couldn't be used for political purposes. We made sure it was used for operational purposes. People have to understand Jersey is a small community, word quickly spreads, and you have to keep a separation between information gained for police purposes and information that might be used for political purposes. Quite often the Minister of the time, Wendy Kinnard, would come into my office and say, I've heard that this or that states member, this senator, this constable has been in trouble with the police. What can you tell me about it? And I'd have to say, well, avoid a minister. I actually can't tell you anything about it because I've put those papers in a secret place and I'm not going to tell anybody because we had it checked out by the lawyers. There's nothing that needs to go to court. It is quite embarrassing, but that embarrassment is going to stay locked away in the basement and I'm not going to let anybody, including you, Minister, get your hands on it. Now, you know, the rules might have changed now. It might have been now, but as a result of this inquiry, in fact, I know for certain as a result of this inquiry, the Minister and his colleagues have managed to get their hands on information about their political opponents. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong that police information should be used in that way, and I think that's a very worrying development. But in my time, we always made sure that this information was locked away in a safe place and it couldn't be used for a political purpose. And in a small community where everybody knows everybody else's business, I think that's very important.
Now, away from the expenditure and looking at the case itself, do you feel like the victims have been let down through this?
I think the victims have been terribly let down by the siphoning off of over £1 million on a wasted disciplinary investigation. There are victims out there who are still crying for justice. Let's remember what happened here. People were abused in establishments run by the Jersey government. They either did not complain about it, or if they did complain about it, their complaints were simply swept under the carpet. We changed that. Lenny Harper launched an inquiry. He built confidence in these people. He brought these allegations out into the open, and literally hundreds of allegations that had been festering for decades were brought out into the open. We deserve support in doing that, and we deserve thanks and praise for the way we did that. What instead we've got is money siphoned off to try and persecute the detectives who brought that abuse out into the open. And the same Jersey government that ran the institutions where the abuse took place is now the same Jersey government that is persecuting the senior officers who try to do something about it. It stinks. It undermines confidence in victims, and I know the day that I was suspended, victims and witnesses were ringing the police saying they're at it again. It's going to be another cover-up. They've suspended Graham Power. Now Lenny Harper's gone. It's all going to be covered up.